All right, get ready because today we're going deep on the mystery of Atlantis. Listeners have sent us so many sources, even a video discussion in Chinese. This is going to be fun.
It's incredible how this legend still has such a hold on us, isn't it?
Hmm.
Centuries later, and we're still captivated.
Absolutely. And to help us figure this all out, separate fact from fiction, we have an expert in myths and legends with us, someone who can connect these stories to actual history and geography.
Well, I don't know about cracking the code completely, but I'm definitely ready for the challenge. Exploring a lost civilization. Sign me up.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning, to the source that started it all, Plato.
Yes, Plato, the philosopher who gave us this detailed picture of Atlantis. And it's in his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. But here's the thing. Those weren't history books. They were philosophical works.
So could Atlantis have been like a thought experiment for Plato, a way to explore his ideas about power, society, good and evil?
That's what scholars have been trying to figure out forever. Like in Timaeus, Plato talks about the ideal state. So maybe Atlantis, with all its technology and complex society, was the opposite. A civilization that failed because it forgot about virtue and wisdom.
That adds a whole new dimension, doesn't it? It's not just about finding a lost city, but about what its rise and fall can teach us.
Exactly. But let's not forget how dramatic Plato's story is. He describes Atlantis with its rings of land and water, palaces covered in this mysterious metal called orichalcum, and its powerful navy controlling the seas. And then, boom, in just one day and night, it's all gone. Swallowed by the sea, earthquakes, a massive tsunami, the whole works.
Wow, talk about a dramatic ending. But how do we square this amazing story with the fact that there's no real archaeological evidence?
Well, that's the big question, right? You've basically got two camps. There are those who think Atlantis is pure myth, maybe something Plato made up inspired by real events like volcanic eruptions or floods, which would have been pretty big deals back then.
And then you've got the other side, the Atlantis believers.
Oh yeah, they're a passionate group, always looking for clues. They've come up with some wild theories, some more believable than others, I have to say.
Okay, give me the rundown. What are the highlights?
Well, some point to possible underwater ruins, things picked up on satellite images off the coast of Morocco, but of course nobody's confirmed that, so it's still a big mystery.
Like a puzzle with half the pieces missing.
Exactly. And then there's this German IT specialist. He built a software model that suggests Atlantis might have been where the Susmasa plain of Morocco is now. He thinks massive earthquakes could have literally moved the whole continent.
Hold on, a whole continent moved by earthquakes. That's a bold claim.
It is.
Mm.
But what makes it interesting is they found this old alloy in that area, and it's really similar to how Plato described orichalcum.
Now that's what I call a clue. It's amazing what technology can do to help us understand these old mysteries.
Absolutely. And if you want a mind-blowing theory, get this. Some people think Atlantis was in Antarctica.
Wait, Antarctica? The frozen continent? You're kidding, right?
No kidding. This idea comes from a 16th century map, the Peary Race map. It seems to show Antarctica connected to South America.
But that would have been millions of years ago, right? Before humans were even around to draw maps.
That's the crazy part. How did whoever made that map know about something so ancient? Some people think it points to a lost civilization, maybe even Atlantis, existing before recorded history.
So a civilization advanced enough to map the world millions of years ago and then just vanish. This is getting wild.
It is. And there's more. They found fossils in Antarctica from a warmer climate, and there are those pyramid-shaped mountains that some think could be ruins of ancient buildings.
My mind is officially blown. But before we get too lost in Antarctica, let's switch gears for a second and talk about that Chinese video discussion. There were some really interesting ideas there.
Definitely. They had this whole debate going, suggesting different places where Atlantis could have been and why it disappeared.
What really struck me was the idea that Atlantis could have been deleted like a line of code in a virtual world. I mean, it's a funny thought, but it makes you think about how suddenly and completely it vanished.
That's a great observation. And it highlights something really important about this whole mystery. Even if we never find Atlantis or prove it existed, its legacy is in its power as a metaphor.
So the search for Atlantis is really a search for meaning.
Exactly. And the Chinese speakers got into that. They talked about the idea that maybe Atlantis' technology and power, in the end, led to its own downfall.
Which ties back to what Plato might have been trying to say, right? Was he warning us about the dangers of too much power and letting society decay?
It's definitely one way to see it. And in Plato's story, the Athenians beat back Atlantis. Maybe that's a message about courage and resilience. Maybe it's saying that real strength isn't just about brute force. but about morals and unity.
So even if Atlantis is just a myth, the lessons it teaches about human nature and the choices we made are very real.
Exactly. And that's why myths and legends last. They touch on universal truths and timeless questions that resonate with everyone across cultures and history.
It feels like we've just scratched the surface of this ancient mystery. There's so much more to uncover, especially from that Chinese discussion.
Absolutely. Their unique perspectives shed new light on this timeless story. It's not just about where Atlantis might have been, but what it might teach us about ourselves and our place in the world.
Well, I'm ready to dive deeper into those Chinese insights. We'll be right back after a short break to continue our exploration.
I'm with you. There's always more to discover, and the Chinese perspective is going to make this even more fascinating.
All right, so let's jump into those insights from the Chinese video discussion. I'm especially curious about how their take on Atlantis is different from what we usually hear, in the West.
Yeah, that's what makes this source so cool. It lets us look at Atlantis through a different cultural lens. For example, they were really interested in the names Atlantic and Atlantis.
It is a pretty striking similarity. Did they think it was more than just coincidence?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
They saw it as a clue, suggesting that maybe Atlantis was somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. They even brought up Plato and how he talks about Atlantis being beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which a lot of people think means the Strait of Gibraltar.
So they're kind of in line with some of those theories we talked about earlier, placing Atlantis in the Atlantic or maybe the Mediterranean. But what about the people who think it was somewhere more far out, like Antarctica?
Well, they didn't completely rule those theories out.
Hmm.
They focus more on how Plato describes Atlantis as super advanced, with a powerful military and technology that might have even been better than what we have today.
That's always fascinated me about Atlantis. It's like a glimpse into a possible future, right? A world with technology so advanced we can barely imagine it.
Exactly. And here's where the Chinese speakers brought in a really interesting cultural perspective. They talked about balance and harmony and how maybe Atlantis's pursuit of power and technology messed with the natural order and led to its downfall.
That's a really good point. It's not just about the technology itself, but how it's used, whether it fits with a society's values and their understanding of the world.
Precisely. It makes you wonder, could a civilization get so advanced, so focused on progress, that it misses something fundamental, something it needs to survive in the long run?
It's a relevant question even today, don't you think? I mean, technology is advancing so quickly now. Are we creating an imbalance that could lead to our own downfall?
That's the kind of deep question that the Atlantis myth forces us to think about. And the Chinese speakers, with their focus on balance and harmony, offer a really helpful way to think about these issues. They even had some out there ideas about what happened to Atlantis. Like maybe it wasn't just a physical event, but some kind of cosmic correction, a way to restore balance to the world.
Whoa, okay, you're going to have to explain that one a bit more.
Well, remember that idea about Atlantis being deleted, like a line of code?
Yeah.
They took that further, saying maybe Atlantis was removed because it got too powerful, too disruptive to the natural order, almost like a bug in a program that had to be fixed to keep the whole system from crashing.
I love how they're using these modern analogies to think about ancient mysteries. It shows that even though these stories are thousands of years old, they still speak to us today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it highlights how powerful storytelling and myths can be. We use these stories to try and understand the unknown, to explore those big questions about why we're here and to make sense of the world around us.
It's like we're all trying to solve this giant puzzle, and myths and legends are some of the most interesting and mysterious pieces.
Exactly. And talking about missing pieces, the Chinese speakers also got into a debate that always seems to divide Atlantis fans. Does Atlantis fall because of natural disasters like earthquakes or tsunamis, or because of something they did?
Ah, the classic question. Fate versus free will. Which side were they leaning toward?
Well, they had a more nuanced view. They suggested maybe it was a bit of both, internal and external factors. Maybe Atlantis's technology and their drive for power made them more vulnerable when a natural disaster hit.
It's like that saying, pride comes before the fall. Maybe their arrogance, combined with a natural disaster, created the perfect storm that wiped them out.
It's definitely a possibility. And it underlines the idea that our actions have consequences, whether we mean them to or not.
So the story of Atlantis is like a warning. It reminds us that even the most advanced civilizations can't escape nature or the consequences of their choices.
Precisely. And it makes us think about where we're headed as a species.
Yeah.
Are we learning from the past, or are we just going to make the same mistakes again?
That's a pretty serious thought. But it also shows how important it is to think critically and reflect on ourselves. If we can learn from the past, even if it's full of myths and mystery, maybe we can create a better future, one that's more sustainable and harmonious.
Couldn't agree more. Ready to hear some of the final points from the Chinese video? They had some really fascinating thoughts about how the Atlantis myth still influences us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me more. You know, it's really amazing how one legend can spark so many different interpretations and discussions, even across cultures and time periods.
What I find so fascinating is that the Atlantis myth doesn't give us clear-cut answers, does it? It's more like a puzzle. It wants us to consider all these different perspectives and possibilities, just like we've been doing today.
And that Chinese video discussion really brought those different perspectives to life. It wasn't just the same old theories rehashed. They were really engaged, debating, speculating, even throwing in some humor.
That's what I love about exploring myths and legends. It gives you this framework for tackling those big questions about history, human nature, our place in the universe.
And they remind us that sometimes the most interesting questions are the ones that don't have a single right answer.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. The search for Atlantis, even if it never leads to a real location or proof, it's valuable just for the journey itself. The searching, the piecing together clues, the different interpretations, that's where the real discovery is.
Like we're all detectives, right? Examining the evidence, looking at the possibilities, and ultimately coming to our own conclusions.
And in a way, that's what makes the Atlantis myths so empowering. It encourages us to think critically, to question what we think we know, to be okay with the mystery.
It reminds us there's still so much we don't know about our past, and that there are always new discoveries waiting to be made.
You know, if you zoom out a bit, this fascination with Atlantis, it speaks to something inside us, this desire to explore, to push the limits of knowledge, to figure out where we belong in the grand scheme of things.
It's like a reminder that the spirit of exploration is still alive and well, whether we're looking for lost civilizations in the ocean or searching for new worlds in space.
And who knows, maybe someday we'll find new evidence that sheds light on Atlantis. But even if we don't, the legend will always inspire us, challenge us, and remind us of how much we don't know.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Atlantis, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all this?
I would say this. Whether Atlantis was a real place or just something Plato imagined, it represents a powerful idea. The idea that civilizations rise and fall, knowledge can be lost and found again, and the mysteries of the past can still shape how we understand the present and the future.
Well said. And to all of you listening, as you continue exploring the Atlantis legend, remember to keep an open mind, question everything, and enjoy the thrill of the unknown. That's what makes the pursuit of knowledge so exciting, isn't it?